All right. I am going to do something crazy. I don't know how else to get this information out, to talk about the number of emails that I've received concerning Doug Weiss and his professional practice. So I don't want to say much except to just read you personal instances and things that have gone on. And I'll try to read as smoothly and quickly as I can. I have a couple that are in my hand, and also then I'm going to throw to another video that I had done where I revealed some of the another story, which was just absolutely shocking. And basically what these people are saying is that the experience led to more trauma in their lives. To go and to try to get help for their marriage led to more trauma. And it wouldn't mean anything if it was like one story, but it's person after person after person. And so we'll begin. All right, so I'm going to begin with this one and try to get to the main parts. Dear Ms. Thompson, I'm writing to share my experience with Doug Weiss. When my husband and I attended his week-long intensive program at Heart Ministries, I never intended to share my experience with anyone besides my closest friends. However, after hearing all of the stuff that is coming out about Doug Weiss, I felt it is beneficial that I share. I had been married for 30 years when my husband and I attended Heart to Heart in October of 2022, so it's very recent. And I was desperate for anyone to help us in our marriage. A friend of mine told me about Heart to Heart because she had read Doug Weiss' book on intimacy anorexia and had seen a few of his videos about it. I reached out to Heart and began virtual counseling with the lady at his center. She seemed well informed and really validated my heart. Her husband was also a counselor at the center, and my husband spoke with him a few times. They had both told us to watch the video called Pain for Love. In that video, Doug spoke of some really deep things that made me feel very seen and validated in what I was going through in my marriage. That video took me double the time to watch because I kept needing to pause it and process that someone was actually understanding the depths of what I was going through. In the video, Doug mentions that he has had women in his office who have told him that their husbands are actually good men, but they just can't seem to treat them right. He says that he has told women that their husband isn't a good person because good people do not treat people like that. And that isn't love, it's abuse. The video is what solidified in my mind that Heart to Heart is where my husband and I needed to go. I have lived in a marriage where my husband has never really been able to connect on an emotional level with me. We were in counseling for over 7 years with a woman who actually made me see that I was living in an emotionally abusive marriage and that my husband was a narcissist and was gaslighting me. I had never even thought for 1 second that I was being abused until my counselor opened my eyes to that. The unpacking of that reality took me a few years and was very hard on me. So to find a professional male counselor, Doug Weiss, who actually understood my 30 years of marriage felt like a miracle and the answer to my prayers. I made the appointment to go to Heart, and so began my experience with Doug. The first day that my husband and I got there, I was filled with hope, yet extremely on edge of what the week would hold. We sat in the lobby and waited for our first check-off thing to do to start the week, which was a 600 questionnaire. I believed it was that many questions, they put in brackets, to evaluate our personalities and other things. We each were supposed to have a 1-hour session with Doug by ourselves every day and a 1-hour session together every day. The first session felt so cold, no smile at all from Doug. Literally, I felt like we were just another troubled married couple on an assembly line. I am a joker and I smile all the time, but nothing made him smile. He went through his list of questions for us together, and then we had our separate appointments. Now, if this was October 2022, let's think about what we now know. Doug is booking his honeymoon with Joni. No one at his office knows that he's getting a divorce. And basically he's living a lie. And if Lisa's there at all, she's also in extreme pain because they have gotten a divorce, I think, by this time. And so this is quite a facade going on right within the office. All right. We went through his list of questions for us together, and then we had our separate appointments. The questions felt very surface level. I knew in my heart that my husband needed so much more. I knew that he needed much healing from a past that he has suppressed. I started feeling like maybe I made a mistake, but I knew I had to complete the week and give this a shot. The second or third session, I can't remember which it was, I was told during my one-on-one session to write down things that I wanted to say to my dad, my mom, and my husband. Doug left me in the room by myself for about 10 minutes to write down my feelings. Then he came back in the room and asked me to read them, no expression on his face as I was crying. He then pulled his boxing bag into the center of the room and gave me a punching pole to hit the bag with. He turned up some music really loud and told me that he was going to leave the room, and he wanted me to punch the bag as hard as I wanted to and to yell and scream as loud as I needed to. He said to knock on the door when I was done. I felt this was so weird and so random, but again, I felt I needed to do the course to the fullest ability that I could. When I was done, I knocked on the door and he came back in. Each session that I did with him did not last an hour. Most lasted about 40 minutes. I was not happy about that since we paid for 3 one-hour sessions a day. After our appointments, we were to go into a room to watch videos that he made, which took most of the day. We also did counseling sessions with other counselors that were one-on-one, me with a woman counselor and my husband with a male counselor. During one of my husband and mine sessions together with Doug, he introduced us to our daily homework. This homework consisted of a few lists of sayings that we were to repeat 10 times to one another. Each list had 10 items on them from what I remember. We were to take turns saying these things to one another. For instance, if I were to start, then I would read the first thing on the list 10 times, and each time I would read it, then my husband would respond with what was on his list for responses. For example, one of the things we had to say was, I believe you love me. Then the other one would say, I do love you. And this would go back and forth 10 times before moving to the next saying on the list. When one was done saying the list, then we would have the other one say it and the other one in due course. The first day that Doug gave us the list, I wanted to run as fast as I could from his office. The first thing I said to him about this list was, so I am supposed to tell my husband that I believe he loves me even when I don't believe that. Doug then says with a condescending attitude, you don't believe he loves you? He wouldn't be here if he didn't love you. I then said, but I don't believe he loves me because if he did, he wouldn't treat me like he does. I then asked Doug, so you want me to lie? He said, I want you to do the homework. And I believe he loves you or else he wouldn't be here. It's up to you if you want to do the work. I was dumbfounded. He literally contradicted his own words in the video. Paying for love when he says that good people don't hurt you, and that isn't love. The very video that made me feel safe to trust this man with my marriage, I did the homework sheets with a horrible knot in my stomach. Then he gave us more homework, which consisted of us having to listen to each other share something that has hurt us, that the other one has done. My husband is not one to hold my heart or have any empathy at all for me. When I share with him anything that is on my heart, he attacks me and talks down to me. I have so much tension in sharing anything with him, and my walls around my heart are so thick. I had shared with Doug in one of my sessions alone with him how my husband has treated me for 30 years and how scared I am to talk. I had shared with him how abusive my husband had been with his words and actions. So in this session together, when Doug tells us of this other assignment to share, I asked Doug, what do I do when we are alone doing this assignment and he gets abusive towards me? Because he can get extremely abusive. Mind you, Doug talks about emotional abuse in his videos, and he talked about it with us. His response to me was with cockiness. When you say extremely abusive, what do you mean by that? Does he hit you? Does he throw you against a wall? What do you mean by extremely abusive? I was shocked. I froze in my seat. I just want to say right here that that anyone who has been in an abusive situation, when someone does not validate and understand the power of the abusive words, and somebody calling you names and being brutal, and a counselor not understanding it, and anyone out there who's been, whether you're a man or a woman and you've experienced abuse, when you're like, what, how abusive is he? Has he hit you? Has he shoved you against a wall? What is it real? When you say abusive, now let's just really, and so right in front of the one that is abusing you, you're basically demeaning the actions that are causing you great harm, and you're demeaning them, in front of that person. So I'm not certain if she was, in her private session or not, but this is not going well. So I was shocked. I froze in my seat as my abusive husband is sitting there. Okay, so he's right there, basically having his behavior minimized. I just told him how my husband can be verbally and emotionally abusive, all of which Doug knew already. I had to see another lady counselor after the appointment, and I was shaking so bad. When she came in the room, I told her that I didn't want to talk with her since my appointment was only 30 minutes and she doesn't know my situation very well. I told her that I needed to talk to the lady that I had already made a connection with through my virtual appointments before going to Heart. She got my other counselor on the phone, and I was crying so hard I could barely talk. She calmed me down and tried to reassure me that Doug didn't mean it like that, and that she wanted to have a meeting with her and me and Doug the next morning. She told me that if anyone understands what I've been through with my husband, it's Doug. Well, that meeting the next morning did not happen, and I had my scheduled appointment with Doug in the afternoon. I had to tell him how I felt about his comment to me, and he tried to say that he didn't mean anything by it, and that he was genuinely concerned about what I meant by saying my husband was extremely abusive. I didn't feel that he was genuine at all. Then in one of my appointments, I had shared with him that I had never known what emotional, verbal, and mental abuse was until my counselor of over 7 years had told me. I told him that I had even been to the Bourne Clinic in Chicago to see exactly what this abuse has done to my brain. I shared with him how I had just finished writing a book about my abuse, and it was almost done, and the editing process. He told me that I would never make money on my book because I don't have a platform. He told me that he had written over 40 books. He mentioned that at least 4 times throughout the week. And he has a good platform, so he makes a ton of money on his books. I have to mention that money was never at the forefront of my mind when I thought about writing a book. My heart behind writing my book was that I would help at least one lady feel seen and not alone who is living in an abusive relationship. I was so insulted when he said that to me. In a later session, he asked me why I'm still with my husband. I told him that I really don't know, and that I asked myself that a lot. I told him that I do love my husband, but I don't know if I can live like this any longer. He told me that I needed to get a job and support myself. I have been a homemaker our whole marriage, and I homeschooled both my kids from kindergarten to graduation. Doug knew that about me. He then asked me, "What are you going to do if you get a divorce? Find the next guy to take care of you?" I was appalled that a Christian man would speak that way to a woman who has made her family her full-time job and has taken the role of wife and mother to heart. The thing that hurt so bad is that my husband had always talked to me and made me feel so small and worthless. And we had spent $10,000 to go to Heart, total with airfare, hotel expenses, and our counseling sessions with Doug, to have a professional Christian male counselor speak to me the same way. Doug told me that he had known a few women who divorced their husbands and made millions. He told me that he wanted me to apply for jobs when I got home and do 10 interviews. Needless to say that I walked away from his office many days feeling so much anxiety and insecurity. I felt as though we were just another payday for him, and there was no heart-to-heart experience for me. My husband and I were to do our homework for 2 months once we got home. For the first month, we were to do homework twice a day. Sure, it helped for the moment, but it was all behavior modification, and now things are right back to the way they were because my husband's heart was not mended and healed from whatever it is inside of him that caused him not to be able to love and have empathy. While at Heart to Heart, we did see Doug's wife one time, and she seemed so miserable. No smile on her face when she talked to us, and no friendliness at all. Doug tried to tell us that he and his wife do this homework every day, and they do date nights once a week. Okay, so he's talking as if this is what he and his wife do when, in fact, they're already divorced, and Joni and he have just put money down on the honeymoon. All the while, this hypocrite was already divorced, she says. No wonder his wife, ex-wife, looked so miserable. I would be too if I had an office next to my ex-husband who is lying to so many broken married couples and portraying as though he is still blissfully married because of his miraculous program. I found out a year later that he was divorced, and I was so upset and felt so scammed. I cannot wrap my head around how someone can lie to so many people. He is all about his pocketbook and bragging about his success. And another thing that makes me so upset is that every single person in that clinic had to have known that he was divorced when we were there in October of 2022. And if he was indeed divorced because of his wife's abuse towards him, then he should have shared the realness of what abuse can do, not minimize it to a woman who is shattered by her abusive husband. Okay. If he was indeed abused by Lisa, then you would think he would have a bit more kindness and tenderness in his approach to those who have been abused. And don't get me started on Jimmy Evans, who married him, and Joni. That is another story. I have done a couple of marriage groups through my church with his teachings, and even though some of his videos have good teachings in them, there are some that are absolutely not okay. The constant referrals back to sex is not okay. It is as if that is all that marriage should be based upon. Even within the small group that I attended, there was not a week that went by that sex was not the topic in some way. Jimmy would say that if a man gives his wife what she needed, emotional connection and communication, that the man would get what he wanted in return. In one of his videos, he says this multiple times and even throws in there, trust me, men, it works, as if he found the key to fulfilling the male sex drive. I'm sorry, but that is not the teaching of Jesus. In Ephesians 5:25, the Bible says that husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church, giving himself up for her, laying down his life for her. It says that the husband is to water her with the word, presenting her as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. Jesus did not love the church with the intent to receive something back. He did not love with what will this benefit me mindset. He loved the church fully with no selfish thought in mind. He calls men to do the same. A godly man is to love his wife as Christ would love her, pouring the word of God over her and building her up, for she is a gift to him and she is the Lord's daughter. Okay, so it is almost done. I'll go down here. Abuse is extremely life-changing to a woman's mind and heart. Abuse causes a woman to live with a full body of armor on her at all times. That weight is so heavy to carry. It is hard to take the armor off because she must protect herself from the man who vowed to protect her and has failed. Jimmy has no idea what abuse does to someone, and neither does Doug. It's heartbreaking that these men are using scripture for their own gain and harming so many people in the process. Lord, please clean up your church and bring the darkness to the surface. So I'd like to say, first of all, just go back. She's, saying, like, if these people in the office knew, but in all fairness, it's my understanding that nobody knew. The entire office was fooled. Doug and Lisa fooled everyone in that regard. They did not know that there had been a divorce already, because after Joni got engaged in the new year, December 31st of 2022, when Joni got engaged, then there was a slip up from Daystar that got back to Doug's office, and then there was hell to pay there, and they all had to come clean, when you know. so 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 this person's wondering why later she looks back and everyone's acting as if they're all married, and there was no truth to that at all. Well, they didn't know, sounds like. But the key things that I pull out of all of this is that, you know, Doug leaves his ex-wife, Lisa, whom he has told all of us how much he loved her. Then he declares that she's abusive, you know, you know, that he has been so hard done by because of Lisa, and lies to the whole world then. So he's lying then, or he's lying now, or maybe he's just a liar all the time. And so that's just one story. I'm going to make this next one shorter, and then I'm going to go to a video where I read another one. All right. I have so many of these, so I've just picked some that are pretty just interesting. Laura-Lynn, hello. I recently received your contact information through a few brave women who have opened up about their experiences with Doug Weiss or are doing investigative work about him. And I've received those people that have sent me information about Doug because they are investigating him. I felt compelled to reach out because my husband and I went through a traumatic ordeal with Doug Weiss at Heart to Heart Counseling Center that I believe aligns with your concerns. After attending a very inexpensive women's retreat at Heart to Heart, I think it was $149 for the entire weekend. So regarding betrayal trauma hosted by Weiss, I decided to attend one of Doug's week-long intensives, taking my unfaithful husband to it. So she does a really short, it grabs you, it's $149, and this is a women's retreat, and then the big, you know, the big thing that they're selling you at that women's retreat is get the week-long intensive, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So, all right. So I was desperate for guidance spiritually and otherwise along with healing for ourselves and our children in our 30-year marriage. Brilliant marketing, by the way. Host a cheap weekend for hurting women and tell them what they want to hear, etc. Then there's a crop of week-long intensive prospects. So they just try to get you in there, and then they sell you the entire package. All right. We invested a significant amount of money, almost $10K, including travel, lodging, his materials, etc., to work directly with Doug for the week, thinking we would receive the support so desperately needed. However, what unfolded in his luxurious private office in Colorado was nothing short of a nightmare. Doug presents himself as an advocate for women who have suffered from their husband's secret sexual sins, abuse, and betrayals, promising a safe space for healing and restoration. Unfortunately, our experience revealed a stark contrast to that image. Behind closed doors, the reality was far removed from the compassion, guidance, support, protection, and understanding I had hoped for and expected from his promotions. I believe that sharing our stories is crucial, not only for our own healing, but also to warn others who might be considering his services or have been harmed by them in the past. I am willing to discuss my experience if you are interested. I'm thankful that the truth is finally coming out. This has been ongoing for years and many marriages harmed in similar ways. Here's another punching bag couple that took up about 15 to 20 minutes of the 55 minutes I had with him. All the while, he stood outside the door sipping coffee and talking to his employees. So while you're punching a bag because you're so upset and he's gotten you to write really emotional stuff and he wants you to punch the bag, then he goes outside, has a coffee break, and does whatever, and you just pass time hitting the bag, I suppose. Okay. So he stood outside the door, sipping coffee, talking to his employees. I finally walked to the door and stood there so he would come back in his office to continue my hour. Note, 1 hour private with him for the wife, 1 hour with husband privately, and then one together. So basically, it's approximately 3 hours per day, not 8. The rest of the time is mostly spent watching his old videos, looking at the materials he had for sale, and attending one of the intimacy anorexic groups. He asked me in a private session how much money I would end up with if my husband filed for divorce. Is it all about the money? You know, what kind of question is that to ask? You're there for like, just an intensive for a few days. I remember thinking, I'm here to hopefully save my marriage, not plan my divorce and answer such a disturbing question. Like, he's not thinking about the person. He's thinking about how much money they'd get and would they need counseling, because we'll be here for you. Lisa Weiss was a frail, nervous wreck during my time at Heart to Heart. I actually saw some similarities in her demeanor and behaviors to my own marriage trauma. Others voiced the same observations.